So what do you do in ministry when you are criticized? Criticism is just part of the job. It's part of what comes with leadership, particularly church leadership, ministry, preaching, all of that. Anytime you're dealing with people, you're going to be criticized. And sometimes that criticism comes from a simple misunderstanding. Sometimes the criticism comes from a misunderstanding of what you're trying to do. It might even come from a misunderstanding of why you're trying to do it. Other times it comes from malice and hatred, and other times it might just come from a simple place of people are in a bad place and they look at you and they think, I'm going to go attack that person. So how do you, as a preacher, as a pastor, as a leader, deal with criticism? How do you filter it? How do you keep going on in your ministry? And how do you not let it take away the joy out of your calling that God has called you to do? We're going to talk about that today in this video. My name is Lane. This is Preaching Donkey. So glad to have you with us today. I'm going to put something free in your hands. It's my free 21-day guide to creating killer sermons. You can go to preachingdonkey.com/21 days and pick that up there. It's just a 3-step, 3-week process that helps you to craft a sermon. And if you got a sermon to preach next week or in the coming weeks and you just want an extra boost and extra help, that guide will be really great for you. Just go to preachingdonkey.com/21 days. All right, so I want to talk about criticism in general. For one thing, you are going to face criticism. There's just no way around it. If you are a leader, if you're doing anything of significance, if you're saying anything of significance, there's going to be people who are going to come after you and attack you. And sometimes in the church context, this is going to happen inside your church by the people that go to your church, and that's common. Other times it might happen from people who are outside of your church, and that's also common. And sometimes it's going to happen from family and other people, and you have to know very clearly how to process those things and how to deal with them. And every leader has faced criticism. Every leader has, if you read Paul's letters in the New Testament, when he writes these letters, there's times where he's addressing people that are complaining about him. And he's saying, you're misunderstanding us. You don't know what we're trying to do. God has called us to this, and he corrects the misunderstanding, and he keeps moving forward. And that's really the key. We have to keep moving forward. So what I want to do is I want to talk about a mechanism that I have to help me process criticism and keep doing what God has called me to do. And I think this will be really helpful to you. But before I get to that, I want to talk about the two primary things that happen that lead to criticism. And this is particularly in your preaching, okay? When you preach, here's two things that happen. Number one, people hear what you're not saying, okay? They hear what you're not saying, or they hear what you didn't say, is maybe a better way to put it. They hear what you didn't say. So, and sometimes this can be good. Sometimes you get through with a message and somebody comes up to you and says, oh my gosh, when you said da-da-da-da-da, God really spoke to me in a massive way, and I'm going to sell everything I have and go be a missionary overseas. You're like, I didn't say that, but I'm glad God used my message to speak to you in a powerful way. That's pretty awesome. So sometimes that happens, and that can be really cool. Other times, it can go negative where people hear what you didn't say, and they attack you for what you didn't say. And so you had no intention of people hearing what they heard, but they still heard it, and that happens. So they'll come to you and say, I can't believe you said X, Y, or Z. You're a terrible person. You need to quit being a pastor and go take a hike. And you're like, I didn't say that. The other thing that happens is people not only hear what you didn't say, but sometimes they don't hear what you're saying, right? Sometimes they didn't hear what you said. And so sometimes you go, no, I addressed that. Like that was in the sermon. That was in the message. That was in the email. That was in the newsletter I sent out. That was in the conversation we had. I said that. And people don't hear it. And so sometimes people can not hear what you said or hear what you didn't say, and it leads to lots of confusion and lots of misunderstanding. And the great thing is when they actually do come to you to deal with these things, you can work them out typically civilly. I'll give you a good example. When I was a pastor at a church in the DC area for about 10 years. And there was a family there that I'd been the youth pastor for many years, and then I was the associate pastor for a few years. And at one point in my ministry there, I had really offended and hurt this family without really knowing it. Like they disagreed with some of the decisions we were making in the ministry, and they came to me about those decisions. I didn't take it the right way, and I kind of dismissed their complaints, which led to even more offense, and this kind of grew. And so at one point, it all kind of came to a head. The guy, the husband, took me to lunch and just kind of unloaded on me like this list of things that I had done to offend him. And I got to tell you, it hurt. It was very hurtful because I had no idea that that's what these people thought of me. But what happened from that is I was able to meet with both of them together and own what I needed to own, apologize for the hurt that I had caused, and then explain some of the reasoning that I should have explained ahead of time, that I should have explained before, to help kind of make sense of why we were doing the things we were doing. And by the end of that meeting, and it took about 2 hours, and parts of it was painful, but most of it ended up being a great meeting. By the end of that meeting, we were all in unity. We were charging ahead together. They had reconciled with me. I had reconciled to them. And to this day, my wife and we consider those people, that couple and that family, dear friends of ours. And had they not come to us and said, you offended us in this way, then we would have never really dealt with that, right? And so it can be a really good thing when people follow Matthew 18, what Jesus said to do. When your brother sins against you, go to him and show him your fault. So that can be a really great thing. And when that happens, reconciliation can happen. And I'm sure in your ministry, there are times when that has happened to you and you've worked through it. And other times there might be situations in which people are not willing to work through it. They just want to complain kind of at you. And that is something that you got to understand how to deal with. So the first kind of framework is we have to understand that people hear what we didn't say and don't hear what we did say. That's just the reality. Now, the second thing is you have to begin to expect. You don't want to be negative. You don't want to have a negative posture towards things, but you want to be realistic and expect that people are going to misunderstand what you said, that they're going to hear what you didn't say, that they're going to not hear what you did say, and they're going to criticize you either to your face or behind your back. That's just the way it is. So you have to kind of expect it, because if you're surprised by it, then it can hurt more if you don't just know that, okay, I'm putting myself out there, I'm going to be criticized for it. That's just the way that it is. And so you've got to expect it, and you've got to know, you got to be very kind of rock solid in what you're trying to do, what you're saying, why you're saying it, what your ministry is all about, what God's called you to do, and you've got to be okay. And that's where something called filters and fuels come in. Now, this is really an important concept. I did not come up with this. This is something that we use at my church in almost every area of our church, and we got it from someone else. I'm not sure where this even originated, because it's been a part of our culture for so long. It might have been Leadership Network. It might have been a large church that we were following and kind of trying to learn from. But filters and fuels. Here's what this means. The same decision that might filter one person fuels another. Okay? Here's what I mean. So in our church, one of the things that we do is we place a high expectation on volunteers and staff, but particularly when somebody wants to volunteer in our church, we don't beg them to volunteer. We don't say, oh gosh, please go work with kids. We're so desperate for volunteers. We consider it a privilege. We consider it something that you do in service to Jesus. You're giving Jesus your best. So you're not doing it for us, you're doing it for the Lord. And so we expect that you're going to do it at a very high level. And our volunteers love to serve, they love to serve together, and they love being a part of a team that's doing something to change the world and make a difference. It's pretty awesome. But one of the things that comes with that, this is just one example, we ask our volunteers to park the furthest away, along with staff. Okay, we want them to park in the furthest spots away. They get there the earliest, along with staff. They park the furthest away. Why? Well, because we want, when people come to our church, the guests and attendees, we want them to be able to park and come in. And We don't want to have the whole parking lot filled up and them have to park in the back and come in, especially if they're a guest or a visitor. And we also, what it does for our volunteers to kind of reinforce every Sunday when they pull up, they're 3 hours before anybody else gets there, they park the furthest away, they walk across an empty parking lot to a building. That just reinforces I'm sacrificing my preferences and my comfort for the good of the mission, for the good of the vision, for the sake of the gospel, right? It's just one little nuance. Now, to some people, that's a filter. What do I mean by that? It's a filter in the sense that some people say, I don't want to do that. Why would I park far away? That's stupid. I'm serving, I'm giving my time, I'm volunteering, you're not even paying me. I'm not going to park far away. So it's a filter. It kind of filters them out. They kind of opt out and say, I don't want anything to do with this place in terms of volunteering here because they're asking too much of me. Now, to other people, it's a fuel, okay? It fuels them. They say, wow, I'm a part of something awesome. I get to park far away. They even see it as a privilege. Like I'm on the inner circle. I'm doing the work of ministry with these people. I'd park a mile away if I had to, if that's what it took to provide a way for people to come and experience the love of Christ. That's the difference, right? One person is filtered, one person is fueled. And as a church, we are entirely comfortable with both. We really are. And our attitude really is not dismissive either way. For example, if someone is filtered by enough things and they decide, you know what, this church just isn't for me. It's not, I don't align with it. We say, great, let's find you a church that you can align with, that you can really serve with, that you can really go and give your life to. If that's not here, that's fine. We want you to be at a place where you're fulfilled, where you can live out your calling. And if that's not here, then the longer you stay here, the worse it gets for you and for us. Now, people who are fueled by our mission, obviously that thrills us because we say, let's partner together then. Let's do this thing. Let's take this mission, this challenge on together. So filters, fuels. Now, when it comes to your preaching ministry, when it comes to the things that you say, there are going to be things that you say, positions that you take that are going to filter some people. They're going to be incensed by it at worst, or they're just going to say, this isn't for me. Maybe at best. They're going to filter, right? And a lot of times people self-filter. They say, this just isn't for me, I'm taking off. And other people are going to be fueled. They're going to say, wow, I really resonate with this message. I really resonate with this mission. I'm sticking around. And where people go wrong and where churches go wrong is they get to the point where they feel like, okay, we've got to be a fuel to everyone. So anything people want, we've got to cater to that and say, okay, oh, you're upset by such and such. Well, we'll fix that. We'll do something different, right? You don't like this. Well, we'll do something over there. They're trying to fuel everybody, and eventually their fuel gets so watered down and scattered that it's not really fueling anything. There's no real fire happening because everybody and by the way, you have a bunch of people who are halfway fueled and halfway filtered, and it's like, how are you gonna move anything forward with a situation like that? I think this is such an important concept for church leaders to understand that things are going to filter and things are going to fuel, and you have to be comfortable with that difference. And you have to be comfortable with kind of how the chips fall. Now, in your ministry, so what we've talked about is people are going to misunderstand you. They're going to hear what you didn't say. They're going to not hear what you did say. This is something that we should expect. And one of the things that we can do to even accelerate or expedite this process is be very clear on what our filters are and what our fuels are, okay? So let me give you an example from this ministry, Preaching Donkey, okay? Preaching Donkey is a very specific ministry. It's a very specific tool. Preaching Donkey, I founded this 5 years ago as a way to help preachers communicate better, okay? That was my goal. As someone who preaches myself, as a pastor of many years, I wanted to help in any way I could as I was learning and am learning how to preach more effectively every single year. And so I started blogging and helping preachers do this. And so my target audience is pastors who preach and who want to communicate better. And then I might even add, and who are open to coaching, okay? So it's a very narrow audience, right? It's not just pastors, okay? It's pastors who preach. That narrows it a little bit because not every pastor preaches. And it's pastors, not only pastors who preach, but pastors who want to communicate better. They have a desire to communicate better. And then pastors who want to communicate better that are open and desirous to learn and desirous of coaching, okay? That's a narrow slice of the pie. So I'm going after those people. I'm not going after all pastors, and I'm sure as heck not going after all Christians or all people, right? I'm going after a very small slice of the pie, but to get to those people, I have to start here, because I don't know who those people are. To get to pastors who preach, who want to communicate better and open to coaching, I've got to cast a wide net. So I get on YouTube. Now, YouTube is something that attracts a lot of people depending on what kind of video you put out there, what the keywords are, what the names are in the video. And so I've done this a couple of times where there's been both an opportunity to speak to my audience, that pastors who preach and want to communicate better and are open to coaching. I've had an opportunity to speak to my audience by addressing a big issue, a big cultural issue, at least in the church space. I did this with Benny Hinn when he denounced the prosperity gospel, and I did this more recently with John MacArthur and Beth Moore and the whole situation around him telling her to go home and the responses that came from that. And so in those videos, especially the John MacArthur one, because a lot of people watch that who have no idea who I am, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and they're not really interested in finding out. They watch one video and then criticize and attack me for it, which is totally fine. I mean, the nature of the video is I was criticizing John MacArthur for what he was doing to Beth Moore, the way he was doing it. So I brought it on. I'm fully aware of that. But in the comments, what you see is a lot of people who want me to do certain things. For example, I mentioned nothing in that video about theological issues other than to say that this issue is secondary. What I meant by that is that it's not a gospel issue. It's not about the nature of who God is and the divinely inspired word of God, who Jesus is, who man is. There's nothing about that issue that is salvific in nature. And so as a secondary issue, which most even conservative theologians would agree that that's a secondary issue, we can agree to disagree. Additionally, Preaching Donkey is not a theological forum, never has been, never will be. It is a how-to tool. It is a resource tool. It is a resource site and a resource channel on YouTube. Again, for pastors who preach, want to communicate better, and are open to coaching, and then also are open to coaching from me. And this turns out to be thousands of people that have opted in and subscribed to my email updates and other things that have said, yes, I want to learn from this guy. But 133,000 people watched the video. So out of all those people, there's lots of people who don't understand who I am, what I do. They don't care to know it. And then they make a lot of assumptions about me, my theology, what I believe, when I didn't say much of anything of that other than to point out, here's how John MacArthur behaved. Here's what was wrong about that. And then here's what we, the pastors who preach, want to communicate better, open to coaching for me. Here's what we can learn from this situation. So with all that kind of flying around in the background, I had to be very comfortable putting that out there, knowing that people are going to criticize. They're going to want to know my theology. They're going to be upset that I'm not being more clear. They're going to want to argue scripture with me, which I just have zero desire to do, especially on YouTube comment section. I have no desire to argue theology on YouTube. I think you go to your pastor, ask him what he thinks. At my church, we're going to deal with that, how we deal with that. Preaching Donkey is about preaching and about things that relate to leadership and preaching in the church. And this was a pretty big deal in that setting. Here you got a guy who's been preaching for 50 years, and I wanted to point out, kind of ask some questions around this. Is this the best way? I don't think it is. I think it's petty. I think it's unbecoming. All of the things I said are true. And the lessons we can learn from that are this, and this. And those are in the video. You can watch it. I'll link it in the description. But my point for this is that if I'm trying to be fuel to everyone, if I'm trying to be fuel to all these people, I'm never getting to these people. I'm never going to reach them because I'm trying to be fuel to everybody, right? I've got to reach these people. And so it's going to filter out certain people. Like if you're a hardcore, and this happened quite a bit, hardcore John MacArthur fan, you're going to look at me and you're going to say, I can't learn from this guy, I don't like him. And that's fine. That's a filter. And so I want you to go learn from someone that you can learn from. And if that's not me, great. And for the people who are fueled by, okay, here's someone who is speaking the truth, here's someone who's willing and daring enough to actually challenge a guy like John MacArthur, I might be able to learn from this guy, and I like what he's saying about these lessons that I can learn. They might go check out other videos and be a part of what we're doing here at Preaching Donkey. And so filters and fuels, right? So people hear what I didn't say, people don't hear what I did say. I expect all that, it's totally fine. And then with that, you get, and this is true, this might be true in your ministry, this might be true in your experience, but with that you get, if you add all that up, people who don't understand what you're doing, you kind of hit a button that is a pretty important button to them. You kind of attacked someone they feel like is pretty significant. Then come the personal attacks, which have been kind of interesting because I've been called a wimp, I've been called a beta male, beta pastor, apostate, wolf in sheep's clothing. The list literally goes. I'm desecrating the pulpit. I can't remember all of them, but it's really funny because I'm like, these are people who have no idea who I am. They don't care to know me, and yet they've got a pretty strong opinion about me from watching one 15-minute video. And so that just comes with it. That's okay. Sometimes I banter back and forth. If I can lighten it up a little bit, I will. Like one person said that I am desecrating the pulpit, and I said I use a tall table, not a pulpit. Okay, it's just a joke, but they're not really in the joking mood, which I understand is totally fine. So, but the thing is, you have to be comfortable with what you're doing, with what God's called you to do. God has not called me to go after everybody and please everybody with you've all got to be willing to learn from me. That's just not. I don't want to do that. God has called me to help a certain group of people. The pastor who is desperate, the pastor who every single week they sit down to write a sermon and it's a daunting task because they're like, oh man, I'm busy. I don't have the time. I need a better system. They don't even know maybe that they need a better system, but they need a better system for mapping out their sermons. People who are like, gosh, I want to reach the next generation, but I just don't feel like I'm speaking to them. People who are like, man, my sermons feel stale and I want them to feel more like alive and use more illustrations, but how do I do that? I just want to be one more help, one more voice, one more book, one more course, one more coaching session, one more blog post, one more video that they can watch that in that moment gives them what they need for that day or that week to be able to keep charging forward and preaching the gospel. That's what I'm trying to do. I don't want to argue theology. I don't want to debate theology on Preaching Donkey. That's not what this is for. We cast a really wide net. If you're preaching Jesus, we love you. We want you to be a part of what we're doing here. And so that's where we are. And we just have to be and particularly me, I have to be very careful not to go down rabbit trails trying to make all these people think better of me, because they're just not going to, and that's okay. I'm not offended by that. I think there's this idea, this weird idea that if somebody disagrees with you, they must hate you, and that's just not true. I disagree with these people may hate me. I don't know. They might. I don't hate them because life's too short and the gospel's too important. I don't want to spend my time thinking about those kinds of things. I want to keep moving forward. So that's the way I deal with criticism. I've got to be very sure of my calling. There's a verse in Galatians 2:10, where Paul says, he asked this question, and I love this question. He says, am I now trying to win the approval of people or of God? Or am I still trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Think about that. Paul sets up this dichotomy and he says, either I'm doing what God's called me to do, I'm a servant of Christ, or I'm trying to please people. I can't do both, right? So which is it? And this is something I have to constantly ask myself. I read a comment, you're desecrating the pulpit, you're a wolf in sheep's clothing, you're working for satanic purposes, you're a terrible person, you should go take a hike. One person said, I think you're disgusting. So you look at that and you go, okay, I'm sure as heck not trying to please those people. So if I'm not trying to please those people, I've really got to work on trying to please Christ, because those are my two options: please people or please Jesus. And life's too short to live for the applause and the accolades of people and the approval of people, especially religious people who don't seek to understand what you're trying to do, legalistic, pharisaical people who don't really even have the capacity to think outside of themselves long enough to really understand what someone's trying to do and why they're trying to do it. But their lives are dominated by negativity and small-mindedness. There's not really much room in my life for that. So again, filters, fuels, you've got to be very, very clear on what those are for you, and you got to keep charging ahead. So my question for you is, how have you been criticized? In what ways have you been criticized? And how do you deal with it? What do you do? How do you kind of work through it? And what have you found helps you to kind of stay on task, to stay on message, to keep pressing ahead with what God's called you to do as you preach the gospel and reach other people with it? Let me know in the comments. As always, please subscribe if you like these kind of videos. If you want more help with your preaching, then go ahead and subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, hit that like button. I would love that. And be sure to download your free 21-day guide to creating killer sermons. If you go to preachingdonkey.com/21 days, it is there for you. And I will see you in the next video.